The mysterious shop of wonders. The sun hung low over the vibrant city of Kuntu, casting golden light over the bustling market streets. The air was filled with the sounds of merchants calling out to passers-by, the aroma of street food wafting through the crowd, and the shuffle of feet as people hurried about their daily business. Among the vibrant colors of fresh produce and hand-woven textiles stood a small, peculiar shop. Its windows, always slightly fogged, seemed to beckon with a mysterious aura, drawing curious glances from every passerby. This was the famous shoe shop of Lindau, a woman whose reputation was as much a part of Kuntu as the bustling market itself. Lindau was an enigma, an elderly woman with a twinkle in her eye, an infectious laugh, and a deep understanding of the art of footwear. Her shop, filled with shelves upon shelves of shoes, was a sight to behold. Yet it wasn't the selection that fascinated people, but the rumors that surrounded it. No one truly understood how she managed to sell such beautifully crafted shoes at prices so low. But more than that, the shoes themselves were said to have strange qualities and inexplicable magic. The tales were endless. A woman bought a pair of boots and soon found the courage to start her own business. A man slipped into a pair of sandals and suddenly rediscovered his passion for music. Of course, there were darker stories as well, people who bought shoes and found themselves inexplicably unlucky, as though the shoes had changed their fate for the worse. One particular afternoon, as the sun began to set and the market began to quieten, a young couple entered the shop. Kofi and Oma, who had been together for years, were drawn by the rumors, each with their own reasons for being there, though neither had spoken openly about their intentions. Kofi, tall and broad-shouldered, had always been the provider. He worked long hours in the fields and took pride in his hard-earned income. But lately, he had been feeling neglected, his efforts going unnoticed by his wife. He watched Oma with a tightness in his chest, her distant gaze telling him what her words could not. She was slipping away from him. Oma, on the other hand, wore the quiet burden of doubt. The joy she once felt in their marriage had faded, replaced by a nagging uncertainty. She couldn't place it, whether it was her growing desire for independence or a feeling that something was missing, but the weight of it gnawed at her every day. The thought of buying a pair of shoes from Lindau's shop was an escape, a way to focus on something other than the tension between her and Kofi. The door of the shop chimed as they entered, and they were immediately greeted by Lindau's warm smile. "Oh, welcome, my dears." Lindau's voice was gentle but carried the weight of wisdom. She eyed them carefully, as though she could see the unspoken words between them. "I see you've come for something special." Kofi shifted uncomfortably, while Oma offered a nervous smile. "We've heard the stories," Kofi said, his voice gruff. "The shoes, they say they change lives." Lindau's eyes twinkled with knowing. "Oh, yes. Many come for that very reason. But remember this, my dear, the shoes may change your life, but it is you who must walk the path they set before you." Oma glanced around, her eyes lingering on a pair of intricately designed sandals that shimmered faintly in the dim light. She didn't know why, but they seemed to call to her. She stepped forward, her hand hovering over the sandals, but Kofi reached out, gently pulling her back. "We shouldn't, Oma," Kofi said, his voice tense. "We don't even know what they do. It's just rumors." But Lindau's calm presence held them both. "You are here for a reason," she said, her tone wise and soothing. "The shoes choose you, not the other way around. But you must be ready, for every step you take, there are consequences, both good and bad." The couple exchanged uncertain glances. Both were drawn to the idea of something changing in their lives, though neither knew if it would be the change they sought or the change they feared. Kofi finally spoke, his voice quieter now. "Maybe we do need a change, after all." Oma nodded, her hand still resting near the sandals. And so, they stood at the crossroads of fate, not fully understanding what the future held, but knowing that, whether they chose the shoes or not, something was about to shift, the hidden power of the shoes. Linda watched them closely, her knowing eyes never leaving their faces as they hesitated in front of the shelves. The air in the small shop was thick with unspoken tension, and though the low light seemed warm, it felt colder to Kofi and Omar as they stood there, uncertain. "Trust," Linda said softly, almost as if speaking to herself. "It's the key to everything. Without trust, the shoes will not work their magic. But if you have faith in each other, in what you could be, they will unlock the truth of your heart." Omar shifted uncomfortably, her fingers still hovering near the sandals, but the uncertainty in her heart was too great. Kofi, however, seemed eager, his eyes drawn to a pair of polished leather boots, shining with an otherworldly luster. His voice was low but persuasive as he spoke to Omar. "We came here because we need something to change, don't we? We need to figure out where we are going. Together." His words carried the weight of someone desperate to fix what was broken, though his own desire for change was perhaps rooted in something deeper than just their marriage. Omar hesitated, her gaze flickering between Kofi and the shoes. She wanted to believe in the magic, to believe that it could give them clarity, but something inside her tugged at her to stop, to leave before they stepped too far into the unknown. But Kofi's quiet insistence, his plea for them to take a chance, convinced her. Reluctantly, Omar took the sandals in her hands, and Kofi picked up the boots. The moment they both held them, a strange weight seemed to settle over them, as though they were no longer just ordinary shoes but conduits to something far greater. Linda watched them, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Remember, my dears," she warned, her voice serious now, "the shoes will reveal the truth, but be careful. What is revealed may not always be what you want to see." Without another word, the couple slipped the shoes onto their feet. At first, nothing happened, just the familiar comfort of footwear. But then, a subtle shift began. Kofi felt it first. His boots were heavier than he expected, but the weight felt right, like the shoes were grounding him, making him feel powerful. There was a tingling energy in his chest, a warmth that spread through his limbs. His posture straightened, and a confidence he had never known flooded through him. He could feel his muscles taut with strength, his mind sharp with clarity. "Omar," he said, his voice suddenly deeper, more commanding. I feel different. This feels good." Omar looked up at him, her heart thumping in her chest. She had been expecting something, but not this. The way he looked at her now made her feel small. She had always known Kofi as the hardworking, dependable man, but now something was changing in his eyes, something she couldn't quite place. She glanced down at her sandals. At first, they were just shoes, comfortable, familiar, but as she stood there, she felt her insecurities growing. The confidence that Kofi had gained seemed to amplify her own doubts. She began to feel like she was no longer the woman he had married, like she was slipping into someone unrecognizable, someone unworthy. Her breath caught as she looked at Kofi, now standing tall, almost looming over her. "Kofi," she whispered, but he was already staring at her with a strange intensity, his eyes sharp and unblinking. "Come on, Omar," he said, his voice more insistent than before. "We need to talk. Now. We don't have time for hesitation." Omar flinched, a wave of unease washing over her. Kofi was always gentle, always patient with her, but now he seemed different. Stronger, more authoritative. The man she had fallen in love with was slipping away, replaced by someone she didn't recognize. As they left Linda's shop, the weight of their new shoes felt heavier with each step. The dynamic between them had shifted in ways neither of them could fully comprehend. Kofi felt an overwhelming surge of control, like he was now the one in charge of their relationship. Omar, on the other hand, felt a creeping fear begin to gnaw at her, unsure of where Kofi's confidence ended and her insecurities began. That night, the tension between them only grew. Kofi became more possessive, watching Oma with a gaze that felt like a command rather than affection. He insisted that she stay close, not letting her out of his sight. Oma, in turn, felt herself withdrawing, her mind racing with doubts. Was she still enough for him? Was this the man she had married, or was something else taking over? As the days passed, the shoes continued to work their magic in ways neither of them could fully understand. Kofi began to make decisions for them both, his newfound dominance growing with each passing day. He demanded things from Oma, things that felt foreign to her, and each time he did, she felt herself unraveling just a little more. The shoes had unlocked something inside him, but it was a power that threatened to swallow their relationship whole. Oma began to question everything, her worth, her place in Kofi's life, and whether they could survive whatever this was. The shoes were changing them, but they couldn't see if it was for better or for worse. And the most terrifying thought of all. The shoes, it seemed, had a power that neither of them fully controlled. The descent into darkness. The days grew heavy for Kofi and Oma. What had once been a partnership built on love and mutual respect had now become a battlefield, the shoes acting as an invisible wedge between them. The power Kofi had gained from the enchanted boots was intoxicating. With each passing day, his confidence swelled, and his once humble demeanor was replaced by an arrogance that he couldn't shake. He walked through life as if it belonged to him, making decisions without consulting Oma, brushing aside her concerns as though they were insignificant. He barely noticed the way Oma had begun to shrink in his presence. He didn't see how her eyes, once filled with love, were now clouded with fear and doubt. To him, the world had become something he could conquer, and she had become a shadow, fading into the background of his new life. Oma, on the other hand, found herself spiraling. Every day felt like a struggle to keep up with the growing distance between them. The man she loved was slipping further away from her, and no matter how hard she tried to reach him, he pushed her further into despair. She could no longer recognize the person Kofi had become. The warmth in his eyes was gone, replaced by something cold, something she couldn't explain. With each passing day, the doubts gnawed at her. Was she not good enough? Did Kofi no longer love her? And the questions echoed louder and louder in her mind, drowning out any rational thought. She couldn't keep fighting against this change, but she didn't know how to stop it. It all came to a head one fateful evening, after yet another argument. Kofi had dismissed her concerns about their relationship, brushing off her tears as if they were nothing more than a mere inconvenience. His words were sharp, cutting through her like a blade. "I don't have time for this, Oma," Kofi said, his voice cold. "You're overthinking things. We don't need to talk about this right now. Just let it go." Oma felt her chest tighten with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. How had it come to this? How had the man who once held her with tenderness and love become so indifferent to her? The rage inside her flared up, and she stormed out of their home, her heart pounding in her ears. She couldn't stay there any longer, not with him. Not in the same house, breathing the same air. She didn't know where to go, but she needed to escape. Her feet took her through the streets of Kuntu, though she wasn't sure where she was heading. It was dark now, the market empty except for the flickering lamps and the occasional vendor packing up for the night. Her eyes, swollen from crying, scanned the streets, but it was then that she saw him, the mysterious figure who had always lingered on the outskirts of the market, never quite blending in with the crowd. Jabulani. Rumor had it that Jabulani was a man of mystical powers. He was quiet, observant, and rarely spoke of his past. But those who had crossed his path often spoke of his strange knowledge and his ability to see into the hearts of others. Oma approached him, her steps hesitant but driven by an unspoken need for answers. Jabulani's eyes met hers, and for a moment, it felt as though he could see right through her, past the layers of pain and confusion. "You're troubled," "Child," he said, his voice low but smooth. "You seek something, but you don't know what." Amma nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "I don't know how much longer I can take it. Kofi is changed. I don't recognize him anymore. And I don't know how to get him back." Jabulani regarded her for a long moment before stepping closer, his eyes narrowing as if weighing her words. "I can help you," he said finally, his voice carrying an eerie certainty. "I can help you find control again, to level the playing field between you and Kofi. But there is a price, of course. A price you must be willing to pay." Amma felt a shiver run down her spine, but she was desperate. Desperate for something, anything, to fix the wreckage of her life. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jabulani's smile was faint but knowing. "Wear these shoes," he said, reaching into the fold of his cloak and pulling out a pair of shoes that glimmered in the dim light. They were beautiful, an elegant mix of silver and deep blue, with intricate patterns woven into the fabric. "These shoes will give you power, just as Kofi's shoes gave him his. But be warned, they come with a cost. These shoes will not just give you strength. They will take from you as well. Be prepared for what you are about to lose." Amma looked at the shoes, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't care. She needed something to change, something to stop the painful spiral she found herself in. Kofi's new power had torn them apart, and now it was her turn. She had to fight back. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. Jabulani's smile grew wider, and for a moment, it felt as though the shadows around them deepened, swallowing the last vestiges of light. "Very well," he said, his voice a soft murmur. "But remember, everything has a cost." Amma didn't care. She slipped her feet into the shoes, and instantly, a rush of power surged through her body. The world around her seemed to sharpen, her senses heightened in a way she had never experienced before. She felt alive, stronger, more aware of every movement, every breath. But as the power surged within her, something darker stirred in the depths of her soul. A coldness, like ice, settled into her chest. She could feel it, the price had already begun to take its toll. And though she now held the strength to stand up to Kofi, she couldn't shake the feeling that something far more dangerous was awakening within her. In her desperation for control, Amma had made a dangerous pact, and she didn't yet understand the full extent of the darkness she had just unleashed, the consequences of deception. Amma's new shoes felt like a revelation. From the moment she slipped them on, she felt an intense surge of energy, a power that coursed through her veins like fire. The shoes made her feel invincible, in control, like she could bend the world to her will. Every step felt deliberate, calculated. She stood taller, walked with purpose, and spoke with an authority that had once seemed out of her reach. But with each passing day, that power began to warp her perspective. At first, she told herself it was just confidence, something she had been lacking for so long. But soon, she realized that the power the shoes had given her wasn't just about confidence, it was about dominance, control, and, most dangerously, revenge. Kofi no longer seemed like the man she loved. Instead, he became a pawn, a tool she could use to regain what she felt she had lost. The distance between them, once painful, now seemed like an opportunity. She began to manipulate Kofi, planting seeds of doubt in his mind, twisting his every action into something that would keep him under her influence. She used the power of the shoes to get him to act in ways he never would have before, pushing him to make decisions that went against his nature. The first time she noticed the change, Kofi had agreed to go along with something he would have once outright rejected. Amma had suggested they take a trip to a secluded place, away from the prying eyes of the city, where they could reconnect. In truth, she wanted to isolate him, to control him without distractions. And to her surprise, he agreed without protest, his usually firm stance on such matters completely gone. It was like watching someone she barely recognized, someone who was no longer her partner, but a person who did whatever she asked. And it felt good. Too good. But power came with its own price. While Oma's newfound strength grew, her moral compass began to disintegrate. She started losing herself in the pursuit of control, of making Kofi bend to her will. The love she once felt for him was fading, replaced by something darker, a need to dominate him, to make him feel the same pain she had felt. On the other hand, Kofi was beginning to feel the opposite. His own shoes, which had once filled him with confidence, now felt like a heavy burden. The power they had given him seemed to be draining him, sapping him of his emotions. He began to notice it subtly at first. His usual enthusiasm for life seemed muted, his ambitions dulled. But it wasn't until Omar's behavior shifted that he realized the true toll the shoes had taken on him. There was something wrong, something sinister. Kofi started to question Omar's actions, her decisions, the way she had begun to manipulate him. The woman he once trusted completely now seemed to be playing some game with him, one he couldn't understand. He tried to talk to her, but every time he brought up his concerns, she would turn the conversation back on him, using his doubts to drive a wedge even further between them. He was left feeling confused, isolated, and alone, like he was losing control of his own life. The tension between them grew, becoming almost unbearable. The trust that had once been the foundation of their relationship had eroded completely, and with it, their connection. Kofi realized that, despite all the power the shoes had given him, they had only made things worse. It was during one of these moments of uncertainty, when he found himself on the verge of losing everything, that he turned to Linda for answers. He had heard her speak of the magic behind her shoes, but now he needed to understand more. Linda listened carefully as Kofi told her of the changes he had been experiencing, of the power, the confidence, and how they had slowly turned into something darker. She listened without interrupting, her face grave. "Linda, what's happening to me?" Kofi asked, his voice heavy with fear. Linda studied him for a long moment, her eyes sharp with understanding. "The shoes, my dear," she said, her voice low and somber. "They were never meant to give power. They were designed to take it, slowly, insidiously. The power you feel now isn't yours. It's a twisting of what was once good. They feed off doubt, off jealousy, and off the very love they destroy." Kofi's heart sank as the truth hit him. "What do you mean?" They're cursed." Linda nodded, her expression sorrowful. "Yes. The shoes were created with the intent to ruin true love. They draw their strength from the very emotions that tear couples apart: jealousy, distrust, fear. They twist the wearer's mind, cloud their judgment, and make them forget the very things that made them whole. What you've been feeling, the power, the drive, it's all a lie. And it will continue to destroy you and Omar, until nothing is left." Kofi felt his stomach churn as the weight of Linda's words settled on him. The realization that the shoes had never been a gift, but a curse, hit him like a tidal wave. He had been duped by their allure, convinced that they held the key to his success and his relationship. But now, he understood, this was the destruction of everything he had once loved. "I have to stop it," Kofi whispered, his voice barely audible. "But how? How do I break free?" Linda's gaze softened, and she reached out to touch his arm gently. "You must confront the truth. You must take off the shoes and let go of the power they gave you. Only then can you begin to repair the damage they've done. But remember, this journey will not be easy. The shoes will fight to keep their hold on you. But if you truly want to save your love, it will be the only way." Kofi nodded, determined to fix the brokenness that had become their lives. He knew it wouldn't be simple. Omar had been consumed by the same darkness, and he could feel the emotional weight pressing down on him. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Kofi realized that reclaiming his love and his own soul was worth the fight. He had to free them both. Redemption and betrayal. Kofi stood in front of Oma, his hands trembling with frustration and desperation. He had finally come to understand the dark truth about the shoes, their curse, the manipulation they wrought on their hearts, and he knew what he had to do. But each time he tried to speak to Oma, each time he begged her to see reason, she only pushed him further away. The woman he once knew was now someone he didn't recognize, consumed by a need for control that the shoes had amplified beyond all measure. Oma, he said, his voice soft but pleading, you have to listen to me. The shoes, they are cursed. They are tearing us apart. Please, let's take them off. We can fix this together. But Oma, standing tall in the shadows of her newfound power, looked at him with cold eyes. Her once loving gaze had been replaced by something sharper, more calculating. The confidence she had gained from the shoes had twisted into arrogance, and her need for dominance over Kofi was clear in the way she refused to even acknowledge his words. You don't understand, Kofi, she said, her voice distant, as if they were no longer partners, but adversaries. You don't understand the strength I found. These shoes gave me everything I needed, power, control. And I'm not going to give that up. Not for you. Not for anyone. Kofi's heart sank as he saw the depth of her transformation. The woman who had once been his equal, his partner, had become someone else entirely. She was lost in the power, lost in the idea that control was the key to happiness. But he couldn't give up on her, not yet. I know you're still in there, Oma, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You're not the shoes. You're not the power. You're more than this. Please, take them off. Let's find a way back. But Oma just shook her head, her expression hardening. No, Kofi. You're the one who's wrong. I've been the one trying to make this work, trying to make us work. But you've only dragged me down. All your doubts, all your insecurities, those were the real problem. I'm done trying to fix this. I'm done with you. Kofi's breath caught in his chest as her words pierced through him. She was no longer the woman he loved, the woman who had once cared for him. She had become someone else, someone driven by the very things the shoes had cultivated, doubt, jealousy, and a hunger for power. As the silence hung between them, something inside Oma snapped. With a cold, calculated motion, she reached down and picked up the shoes she had once so eagerly embraced. Without a word, she threw them into the fire, the flames immediately consuming them in a burst of heat. I'm done, Kofi, she spat, her voice shaking with emotion. You were the cause of all this. You were the one who let me slip into this madness. I never needed you. I found something far more powerful, far more fulfilling. Kofi stood frozen, staring in shock as the flames danced around the shoes, their magic now consumed by the fire. His mind raced as he tried to process what had just happened. Oma wasn't just rejecting him, she was rejecting everything they had once shared. And now, it was too late. Oma, wait. Kofi shouted, his voice cracking. Please. But before he could say more, she turned away, her eyes hard as stone. I've already made my choice, she said coldly. I've been working with Jabulani. He's the one who truly understands me. His power is what I need. Not yours. Not anymore. The words hit Kofi like a slap, and for a moment, he could only stare at her in disbelief. Jabulani. The same man who had given Oma the shoes, the man who had manipulated her. The realization crushed him. Oma had been planning this all along. She had been working with Jabulani, using him to replace Kofi with someone who would give her the power she thought she wanted. In that moment, Kofi felt his heart shatter. He had been so desperate to save her, to bring her back from the brink of destruction, but she had already fallen too far. She had made her choice, and now there was no turning back. But even in the face of betrayal, something stirred within Kofi. His love for Oma was still there, deep and aching, even though she had turned her back on him. The betrayal stung, but he knew he couldn't give up on her completely. Not yet. Heartbroken, Kofi made his way to Lindayo's shop once more, the weight of everything he had just learned pressing heavily on his shoulders. He needed answers. He needed to understand what had truly happened to Oma and how he could undo the damage. When he entered the shop, Lindayo was waiting for him, as if she had known he would return. She took one look at him and sighed, her expression soft but knowing. "You've seen the truth, haven't you?" Lindayo said gently. "Oma is lost, Kofi. The shoes have consumed her, and now there's nothing left of the woman you loved. You can't save her. Not now. Not after all that happened." Kofi swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "But I still love her. How do I fix this? How do I make it right?" Lindayo's eyes softened with sorrow. "I'm afraid you can't fix it, Kofi. The shoes were never meant to be a gift, they were a curse, meant to ruin everything they touched. And they've done their job. Oma is beyond saving now." Kofi's heart sank. He had hoped that there might still be a way to reach Oma, that somehow he could pull her back from the edge. But Lindayo was right. She had fallen too far into the darkness, and the shoes had twisted everything they once had into something unrecognizable. "I'm so sorry," Lindayo said, her voice heavy with pity. "But sometimes, love isn't enough to save someone from the choices they've made." Kofi stood there in silence, the weight of his heartbreak consuming him. He had lost Oma, not to Jabulani, but to the power of the shoes, to the curse that had ruined everything. And now, as he watched the last remnants of their love burn away, he realized that no amount of love could bring her back from the abyss she had chosen to walk into. The shoes had destroyed them both. And all that was left now was the broken pieces of a once beautiful love story, breaking the curse. Kofi stood at the threshold of Lindayo's shop, his heart heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. His love for Oma had been tested, torn apart by the power of the shoes and the curse they carried. He had seen the damage the shoes had done to both of them, and he knew that there was only one way to end it, one way to free them from the darkness that had consumed their lives. Lindayo greeted him with a knowing look, as if she had been expecting his return. Her face was sad, but wise, a reflection of all she had seen and understood about the power of the shoes. "Have you come to face the truth, Kofi?" Lindayo asked, her voice gentle yet firm. "Have you come to break the curse?" Kofi nodded, his resolve clear. "I know what I have to do. But I need your help, Lindayo. I need to know how to truly end it, how to lift the curse and stop the pain." Lindayo led him to the back of the shop, where the remnants of the shoe's power still lingered in the air. She turned to him, her eyes filled with a deep sorrow. "To break the curse, Kofi, you must burn the shoes," she said softly. "But not just in any fire. You must burn them in the flames of forgiveness. Only then will their power truly be destroyed." Kofi looked at her, confused. "Forgiveness?" he asked. "How can forgiveness be the key? The shoes have done so much damage. How can I forgive Oma after everything she's done?" Lindayo placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm and comforting. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting the hurt, Kofi. It doesn't mean excusing the betrayal. It means choosing to let go of the anger and the pain. Forgiveness is the flame that will destroy the shoes, and in doing so, it will strip away all the power, yours and Oma's. You will both be left powerless." Kofi's heart raced as he processed her words. Destroying the shoes would mean losing the power they had gained, the strength they had once thought would save them. But in the end, It had only torn them apart. The thought of losing that power terrified him, but he knew what he had to do. The power they had was false. It wasn't real. And it wasn't worth the destruction it had caused. I understand, Kofi said, his voice steady. I'll do it. For both of us. Linda gave him a small, encouraging nod. You are ready, Kofi. Remember, true strength comes not from power, but from the ability to forgive and choose love over control. With a deep breath, Kofi turned and walked out of the shop, the shoe still burning in his mind. He knew that Oma would not understand at first, that she would resist the idea of giving up the very thing that had given her power. But he was certain that this was the only way to save them both. Kofi found Oma sitting alone in their home, her eyes hollow, as if the life had drained out of her. She looked up as he entered, and for a moment, there was nothing but silence between them. The weight of their past actions hung heavy in the air. Oma, Kofi said softly, his voice filled with emotion. I know what we've done. I know how far we've both fallen. But there's only one way out of this. We have to burn the shoes. We have to destroy their power once and for all. Oma's eyes widened in shock. What? You want to destroy them? After everything we've been through? After everything I've done to you? Kofi stepped forward, his heart aching. Oma, it's not about the shoes. It's about us. We've both been blinded by the power they gave us. But power isn't the answer. It's forgiveness. That's the only way we can heal. Oma's expression faltered. For the first time, Kofi saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes, the cold exterior she had built up beginning to crack. She stood up slowly, her body trembling with a mixture of fear and regret. I don't know if I can forgive you, she whispered, her voice breaking. I don't know if I can forgive myself. Everything I've done. I've lost everything. Kofi reached out to her, his hand gentle but firm. Oma, you don't have to do this alone. We can rebuild. But we can't do it with the shoes. We have to let them go. We have to forgive each other. Oma's eyes welled with tears as she looked at Kofi, the pain of her betrayal and the curse of the shoes finally hitting her. She had lost herself in the pursuit of power, and now, standing before him, she realized just how far she had fallen. The shoes had made her forget everything that truly mattered, the love they had shared, the trust they once had. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice trembling. I never meant to hurt you. I thought the shoes would fix everything. But they didn't. They made it worse. Kofi's heart broke for her, for both of them. He gently took her hand in his. It's not too late, Oma. We can still make it right. But we have to let go of the past. We have to forgive. Together, they walked to the flames, the fire that would cleanse them both. As they stood there, Kofi held the shoes in his hands for the last time, the power and the magic that had once promised them everything now fading into nothing. With one final, resolute decision, Kofi tossed the shoes into the fire. The flames consumed them, the magic unraveling in the heat, until there was nothing left but ashes. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, as the shoes burned away, Kofi felt the weight that had been on his heart for so long finally lift. The curse was broken. The power was gone. Oma, her eyes filled with tears, broke down in Kofi's arms, her sobs raw and full of regret. I've ruined everything, she cried. I was so blinded by the shoes, by the need for power. I didn't see how much I was hurting you, hurting us. Kofi held her tightly, feeling the warmth of her tears against his chest. We'll rebuild, Oma. We'll start over. This time, with trust, with love. No more power. Just us. As the flames died down and the last of the shoes turned to ash, Kofi, and Omar stood together, no longer consumed by magic or desire for control. They had broken the curse, and in doing so, they had broken free from the darkness that had threatened to consume their love. The lesson was clear: the greatest power in life was not the ability to control, but the strength to forgive, and the willingness to choose love over everything else.